Hi guys, different location today. I've actually just had a very fast drive up the road from the office where the Wi-Fi decided not to work. Great timing. So in my sitting room, so you might be meeting my kids and my dog at some point this afternoon. So lovely to be here with you. And I'm really conscious that a number of you have been with us on this series of webinars. So every time I introduce us, I'm going to just do 2 minutes on that. If you've heard it all before, please just bear with me. So for those I don't know, and I know a lot of you, my name is Elke Edwards, and I am the founder at Ivy House. I spent 20 years of my career working at the most senior levels as an executive coach, as a leadership developer, and realized through that time that there are a set of skills that when mastered make a game-changing difference to how your life turns out. And that, as a number of you know, caused me to change my life. We sold our business and we still work with a whole range of amazing organizations, but now we work with their future leaders, their graduates, their apprenticeships. My view was that we needed to give the very best learning to people who are going to be leading our companies and our country in the future. So that's what we do. We also have a program called the Ivy House Award, which we launched in September last year in a number of incredible schools, and that's now multiplied and is going to sixth formers all over the country. So, so what are these skills? Here they are. We call them the Ivy House 7. And of course, as you know, I could talk for days on each of these. I could give them all at least 2 or 3 days. But today we're going to focus in on the skill of human leadership. And blimey, has there ever been a time when we have needed human leadership more? So as usual, I am going to start with a question. But before I do that, my first question is, what do you need to give yourself? How can you make this next 45 minutes just for you? I have finally learned that the webinars are supposed to be half an hour long and I'm supposed to allow 15 minutes for questions. I thought it was 45 minutes long and 10 minutes for questions at the end. So this webinar will be slightly shorter than the others, but please, what do you need to do with your kids, your phone, your notifications to just give yourself a moment to reflect? So let's start with the question. Grab yourself, in fact, I'm going to ask you to put this in the chat actually. What do you want from a leader right now? And I'm talking about you personally. What do you want from a leader right now? And Tim, if you can share with me the sorts of things that we get through.
Yeah, of course. So we're getting lots of things through. So we've got authenticity, we've got direction, we've got understanding, clarity, compassion, appreciation, transparency, flexibility, transparency again, patience, communication, bold decision making, empathy, support, understanding, contact, bravery. Wow.
That's
what a
lovely.
collection.
What a great list.
Vulnerability.
We need
amazing.
to publish
Support.
That list.
Yeah, incredible.
Let's get that list out for everyone to see on LinkedIn. So, okay, so here's my next question then. And if you could do the same again, give it to us on the chat. What are you getting?
So what are you getting? So we've got managed, pressure, humor, communication. What else we got? Anxiety. Okay. Irrational, increased workload, increased pressure, confusion, some compassion, collaboration, strength, recognition, distance, time pressure, staying the same, complaining from people, humor, great, patience and understanding, composure, check-ins, business as usual, transparent communications, good levels of tolerance and understanding, honest collaboration. Wow.
So it looks like we're getting, Tim, it seems to me that we're getting them from one end of the spectrum to the other. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So the reason I ask this question is because there's a whole load of sort of mystery around leadership, really. And in fact, I always forget this number, but if you put the word leadership into Google, you get something like 2 billion results in 0.28 seconds. There's so much been written about it, but by just asking ourselves just a couple of really simple questions, what we start to hone in on is what we actually need and want from our leaders. And of course, that list would be no different if I asked the people working for or with you right now. So we generally know what we need and want. The question is, of course, is whether or not we're getting it or whether or not we're giving it to somebody else. So I have one aim today, and that is to allow you time to tap into your inner wisdom, because we pretty much always know what's needed. And to ask yourself the question, what is needed from you as a leader right now? And it's important, of course, to point out that I don't care if you lead in the formal sense, anybody, every single one of us is a leader. We are playing a role as a leader in this world right now. So to cover that, I'm going to cover 3 areas. The first is context. What's the leadership landscape? What landscape are you leading in? The second, I'm going to look at the what and how of leadership. And then finally, just look at how we can truly be a human leader right now. Now, as we all know, we've woken up to a new reality. And for those of you that were on my mindset webinar, you will have hopefully remembered the slide around the transition, how we go through, change happens in an instant, but we go through a transition. We go through shock, fear, sadness. We move into a sort of sad acceptance, and then we evolve into a new stage of creativity and understanding of what the new reality is. And of course, when a change happens, we hit something called crisis energy. And you will have noticed that in your teams and your organizations. You know, something's happened, something's changed, and we all jump up and we give all our energy to it. And we think of solutions, and we move ourselves home, and we go and buy desks and chairs and find ways of homeschooling our kids without murdering them. And we have a whole load of energy around that change. But after crisis energy comes something different. The crisis energy starts to wane, and a number of you, I'm sure, will have felt the exhaustion of that leaving your body. And then we move into a whole different set of changes. So from a business perspective, you know, we have, obviously, most of us have pressures on revenue, supply chains are changing, the resources, they're not where they used to be. They're not next to us in the next office, but they're all at home or working from wherever. The relevance of our vision will have gone in some shape or form, and the targets we set and all of that work we put in to creating a plan now has been thrown up into the air. Some of us are looking for new channels to market, new delivery mechanisms. We're finding new ways to communicate and be clear with our teams. And of course, the skill sets that are required from us and our teams, you know, this is where the true creatives will come in, the collaborators, the communicators, and the coaches. So everything's changed from a business perspective, but never before have we brought the business and the personal so closely together. You are now talking to me in my living room. That's never happened before. We've lost our communities. So many of us used to go into the office and have a whole new community there, have lunch with our mates, have a coffee with somebody, have a little chat. That sense of belonging, sense of significance and recognition is harder to come by. Variety. Most of us are living and working at home, and there's no boundaries or natural boundaries for us. We're not getting up and commuting. It's harder to distract ourselves. We're also wondering what our direction looks like and what the opportunities for us are, and wondering where the joy is going to be found in life. Our dependence has come in, so we're more dependent on a few people. The relationships with people in our immediate circle have become more important. There's clearly uncertainty, and we've been forced, a lot of us, to look inward and start to question what kind of life we want. Now, what's fascinating about all of this change is this absolutely reflects a model that was created by Frederick Laloux in a brilliant book called Reinventing the Organization. And I won't go through the whole thing, but it talks about how the nature of organizations have evolved from the initial wolf pack, where we had a massive dictator that, you know, started to get some division of labor and command in there, but also, you know, was powerful and chaotic and drove by fear, into an army-like structure, which is what we find in a lot of schools, a lot of universities, interestingly, the NHS, where there's a lot of hierarchy, command and control, a lot of repetition in roles. An evolution into what he named the machine, which is where a lot of the people I suspect that are listening today actually work in machine-like organizations that, you know, have brought about innovation and accountability and a meritocracy, but also drive performance, drive for profit. You know, the shareholder is God. It's interesting, it's actually in the machine that we started to call people human resources. I don't know if you've ever wondered about that term, but the very nature that we call human beings resources might tell us something about how machines often treat human beings in their companies. Then there was a sort of a deviation into family-like organizations, some charities, which was all about, you know, we're going to collaborate, we're going to cooperate, it's all about going to be fair, but actually sometimes left behind some of the great things that have been created in other structures. But the argument is that if we're all going to survive in a new world, we need to work within organizations that are known as living organisms, organizations that do the right thing, that allow people to play to the right strengths, to be calm in adversity, to embrace change rather than fearful of it, to bring our whole selves to our role, and actually to practice agile power, to notice when somebody else is better placed to make a decision than us, even if we have the title of leader on our door. That's a joke, isn't it? So it's really important to notice that actually what's going on right now is an evolution of organizations in themselves. And what does this mean then for leadership? Well, really it means that we all have to acknowledge a new reality. We need leaders more than ever before, but you know what? We're going to have to be a hell of a lot better than leadership has been in the past. And we're going to have to be different. And I think that's no bad thing. As I said earlier, crisis energy is waning, and actually the job and organization becomes an easy target for people's sort of sense of dislocation, and they don't know what to do with that feeling. So as you know, in Ivy House, we talk a lot about human leadership. And human leadership is the practice of leading oneself and others in a way that empowers everyone to reach their full potential, delivering individual, organization, and societal success. I want you to imagine for a moment a world in which everyone was doing the jobs they should be doing. Now, those of you that know me know we have 5 teenage daughters. And I wrote a blog the other day. I don't know if any of the rest of you have been doing a whole load of these bloody quizzes. They drive me insane. But in our family, there's 7 of us. So we've got a bit of an advantage against lots of other families. But you know, the truth is the quizzes in our families are one usually, but you know, played by only 3 members of our family, my husband and two of our daughters. And those daughters have that sort of intellectual brain. They have an incredible memory for ridiculous kings and queens and which capital of which country and all the rest of it. That's one type of intelligence. But I also have a daughter that released her first album at 15 and can write the most incredible songs. Another one that is a phenomenal drum player, and another one that will absolutely be an entrepreneur. My point is that I couldn't put the entrepreneur in to lead the quiz team. What we need is for us all to find our place in this world, to work within our element so that we can show up and contribute to the whole. And that's what human leadership does. It creates environments where people are able to discover what puts them in their element. I want you all to just close your eyes for a moment. You know, I love a bit of deep breathing. Close your eyes, take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And I just want you to reflect for a moment. In a work context, when are you in your element? When are you flying? When are you in the zone? Okay, open your eyes. And I want you just to consider how much time as a percentage of time do you spend in that place? So if we are performing as human leaders correctly, we are enabling people to perform in their element. And that has not changed. So that's the first part I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about the leadership landscape you're working within. Now I want to move on for a moment and look at the what and how of leadership. As I always say, I believe leadership is far more simple than people make out. Now, the what of leadership is absolutely always the same, whether or not you are a one-man band or you run a massive global organization. It's always the same. And it's made up of these three things. First, you need a vision. Then you need a plan that's going to deliver that vision. And then you need an environment that people can and want to deliver the vision and the plan. Now, for most of us in organizations, our vision and our plans have been thrown up in the air. But people still need one. So it might be that your vision is to just get clarity in the next 4 weeks. And our plan is to put all our resources to enable us to do that. Our vision might be to trial X, Y, and Z, and the plan might be to do that. But don't delude yourself that you can operate as a leader without these things. Now, the environment is split into two things. The first is all about the process environment. So, people will ask themselves, do I have the resources to do the job? Do the processes work for me or against me? Am I fairly rewarded? Do I have the autonomy I need and the support in the right places? Am I communicated with effectively? And then from an emotional perspective, they'll think, do I believe in you? Do I believe in what we're doing here? Do I enjoy it? Do I feel like I belong? Have I got friends here? Does our work actually matter? And people are asking themselves that in spades right now. Am I proud of what I do? Am I growing? Is it going to positively impact my future? And can I stay well while I'm working here? So as leaders, the job of leadership is these three things: to have a vision, a plan, and to create the environment where those two things are possible. Because from a human perspective, nothing has actually changed. People still want meaning, they still want growth, they still want belonging, recognition, progress, clarity, security, variety. And we as leaders need to find ways of providing all of those things. So here are my questions for your pen and paper. And this is going to be recorded. Hopefully you can still all hear me. My Wi-Fi hasn't given up the ghost. Here are your questions. What vision is possible now? And what's our plan to make it happen? What new processes need to be created? And how do we create the emotional environment? So that's the job of leadership, no matter what and who you are leading. The second part is the how of leadership. And this is what makes the difference between Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Both playing in the same field, but how they did it, totally different. So what we have to do is put ourselves in the center of the job of leadership. There's us in the center, operating from a place of core strength, from those Ivy Houses out there that know what I'm talking about. Our skills and knowledge, what we bring to the party, and of course, ultimately, our behavior. Because leadership is experienced 100% of the time from behavior, from your behavior. So here's my next question for you. What behavior have you chosen recently? And I want you to just jot down 2 lists. Just do a little line down your center of your paper. First, what behavior have you chosen at home? And secondly, what behavior have you chosen in work? Just write 3 or 4 down on each column. And then we have to do the Ivy House reality check. And I want you to imagine that I was asking somebody that lived with you and somebody that worked with you. What would they say? What behavior would they say you've chosen recently? So what I want to do now is to move into what it really means to be a truly human leader. And the first thing, and the reason I've just asked you the question about your behavior is, first, we must lead ourselves. We need to lead ourselves before we can lead others. And when we look and reflect on the behavior we've been choosing recently, that is the manifestation of how we are leading ourselves. For those of you that don't know us at Ivy House, this is you. You're made up of your vision, your driving forces, your values, your beliefs, your element, and your purpose. And it is absolutely essential for any leader to do the work to understand what those component parts are, what the recipe is of them. Because if they don't, they end up showing up like this. That doesn't work for anyone. It doesn't work for you, and it doesn't work for your team or your peers or the people you report into. Now, what I'm not suggesting is that when you know all of this stuff about you, that you will never get off balance. And we use this yogic pose a lot in Ivy House to demonstrate, you know, when we're in balance. I'm actually standing on one foot here. But when we're actually in our yogic balance, when we are balanced and we are living a life that is in accordance with our vision, that is meeting our driving forces, that is aligned to our values, that puts us firmly in our element, we are able to balance. And it doesn't mean that we don't come off balance, but what it means is that we are able very quickly to get back into balance, because we can realize, I'm out of balance because I am violating a value. I'm out of balance because I spend 90% of my working time doing stuff I don't love doing, and actually I'm not very good at. When we realize that about ourselves, we are able to self-correct. Now, the thing, of course, that allows us to self-correct is by taking our well-being really, really seriously. Our mind, our body, and our soul. So grab your pen and paper for a moment and just give yourself a score out of 10 for where you would say your mind well-being is, your body well-being, and your spiritual, your soul well-being. Out of 10, where would you score yourself? It's really interesting in times of crisis where there is a habit of leaders to put their own well-being way back on the back burner. But what it means is that we show up like my falling apart guy here, and nobody wants to work for somebody that does that. So where are you scoring yourself? And I'm going to just talk for one moment about mind and how connected you feel to your inner calm, your inner knowing, and your inner peace. Or are you spending a lot of time in thought spirals? This, as we know from the webinar, our mindset is a conscious choice. We can step out of a thought spiral whenever we want to. And that is our duty if we are going to lead others. So that's leading ourselves. So what about creating a human team? Well, what I'm going to urge you to do is to look at your team members, all as individuals, and support them to understand, given this changing context, what they need to keep themselves in balance, what they need to put them in their element in this new world, to meet the needs of their driving forces, their need for significance and recognition and belonging and love and connection and security and variety. Because this is one thing we're going to have to teach everybody. I talked to you all first about self-leadership, and actually we have to teach our team self-leadership too. There's a big difference between showing empathy and care and compassion for your team and trying to rescue them. We cannot rescue them. We need to teach them to fish. We need them to recognize that COVID is an event and that they have a choice about how they respond to that event. They can flip out, they can stress, they can eat badly, they can not exercise, they can try and do too much work, they can not have boundaries within their lives, or they can do something different. And our job as leader then is to facilitate that learning within them, enabling them to show up as their best self and make choices from a place of conscious mind as opposed to thought spirals. And the final piece before I end and ask you a couple of more questions is to really encourage you to look at your team again. This is our team effectiveness framework. It's phenomenally useful to understand the skeleton on which your team is hanging on. So if we start with purpose, what are you doing? Who are you doing it for? And why are you doing it? And that's the purpose of the team. Why does the team exist? What's the difference between your team and a group of people vaguely working together? Well, the difference is a team has an agreed purpose and is on a mission to hit and achieve that purpose. So what is your team's purpose right now? And what ways of working do you need to put in place? If that's our purpose and these are our circumstances, how are we going to work? And that might mean, you know, people coming up with different skills that they haven't used before and using them differently. That you might have somebody within your team who is phenomenal communicator, organizer, an empath that is really great at looking after people, an amazing coach, an amazing creative thinker. What skills do you already have within the team and what skills are you lacking? How are you going to build relationships in this new context? They really matter. And you, as I said right at the beginning, you're going to be dealing with people in their own personal circumstances. And your leaders are going to, and same for your peers. We show up as leaders to our peers. And your stakeholders. What's your agreements? You know, I have a big thing about the difference between agreements and expectations. What agreements do you have with your stakeholders? Who are your stakeholders right now? What are they expecting of you? Now, of course, what holds all of this together is mindset and conversations. So how are people showing up mentally? The machine, the form of the organization, which I think is so common and prevalent, especially in the UK, but in the Western world in general, people generally show up for themselves. They show up for their own career path, their own reward and recognition. But actually, if we're going to work together as a community to keep our organizations and our society afloat, we're going to actually have to show up showing and playing for the team. And the team is the organization you work for. And how good are you then at having conversations, dealing with what needs to be dealt with, being efficient with your time, knowing how you're going to make decisions bravely. I loved whoever said, you know, making brave decisions and actually accepting if it turns out to have been the wrong decision or it fails and learning from it. How are you going to become a learning team? So we've covered three things. We've covered the context in which you are leading right now. We've covered the what and how of leadership. And we've taken a brief look at how you can show up as a truly human leader right now. So here's my penultimate question. And I'd love you to share this on the chat. Just one thing that you are going to do differently, having heard what you've heard this afternoon.
Okay, so if you'd like to use the chat to put your responses in there, and we'll see what you've got, and we'll share that with Elke and with everyone. So if you'd like to use the chat box to record those. Slow down and think, listen, purpose, to rethink the purpose of my team, one-to-ones with each team member, be more open with the team, recalibrate on purpose, think about my own well-being more, take stock with my direct reports about what the purpose of our team is now, turn up 100%, wow, that's ambitious, more mindfulness for myself and others, ask myself what's the why behind my decisions, look after my own well-being and breathe, great. looking after myself, looking after my own well-being, taking some time out to review my relationships with other peers and recalibrate for this new context. Don't assume. Create boundaries and work less to set examples.
That's lovely.
Use more how and what questions to encourage team members to self-learn. Wow, yeah. Provide more training, better understanding, ask my team what they need, reframe. Great. Good.
I think one of the most important jobs of a leader is to create more leaders. And by creating more leaders, we're going to have to self-equip them and resource them to deal with what is going on and to ask for help when they need it. So show up with your full human self. So before we finish, I just wanted to not leave you with this quote, because I've got a few more things I want to talk about, but becoming a leader is synonymous with becoming yourself. It's precisely that simple and precisely that difficult. When you show up as your full human self, not leaving your humanity at the door when you show up to your Zoom call, but showing up and sharing that this has just happened, or you're actually, confused about this and you don't understand that. That is totally fine and totally human. And what it allows your team to do is collaborate and work with you. So work on becoming fully you, your fully brilliant core strength you, and you will end up to being a better leader. So this final question is really, what do you want people to say about you as a leader? So I want you to imagine that I walk into a room and you're not there. That's what they tell me when you're not in the room. Give me one word that you would like them to tell me about you as a leader.
Okay, so we've got caring from Petra. We've got empathic, confident, encouraging, effective, compassionate, authentic, helpful, delivers, kind, supportive, honest, authentic communicator, honest, human.
Brilliant.
Okay, great. Confident.
It gives me
Good.
hope.
Shows vulnerability.
It gives me hope for the future of leadership. So I want to thank you all for your time this afternoon. As usual, I'm really happy to take questions. If you need to and want to follow us on Ivy House, you can get us on all of these different social media platforms. But if there are any questions at all, please pop them in the chat and we can deal with them. Great. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions to start off. Please do use the chat to ask some questions, things that are sitting in the top of your head right now. So the first question we have, Elke, is from Vera, who said that under leadership expectations, leaders are often leading from maybe a hierarchical perspective or a performance perspective or a family-driven philosophy. They've got different philosophies of leading. So how do we navigate our way through that within an organization when there are so many different leadership philosophies? What are your Hello,
thoughts?
Vera. Lovely to hear from you. So brilliant question. And the answer is, it's always been that way. We just pretend it's not. So historically, traditional leadership was all about, let's try and put people in a box and a leader looks like this. And, let's give them these skills. And apparently good leadership looks like that. Actually, it doesn't. What good leadership looks like, and this is why, I am not the CEO of Ivy House, because I would be an absolute rubbish CEO. But I'm a great creative director. So actually the answer is, how do you navigate? You ask them. You find out what is on their recipe tin, what it is, how do they like to be communicated with, what their values are, how they, what's important to them, what's their purpose, what puts them in their element. And then guess what? You share with them the same for you. So that list around core strength, absolutely get to know that about yourself and share with them your recipe. So navigation is about communication. And one of the things, as you know, we always suggest when you get a new boss, you sit down with them and go, tell me what's important to you. Tell me how you like to be communicated with. Tell me what's really going to annoy you. Tell me what excites you. Tell me when you've had a great day, what would make it a great day and what would make it a really bad day. And then you do the same. You share the same. And then you get to know each other on a human level. So I'm very passionate about this. Can you tell? That really, really matters. And this sounds like a little plug for the book, and of course it is, but all of the core strength stuff is covered in the book, which is going to be coming out in about a month. So you'll be able to read through that.
Perfect. Okay. And Elke, we have another question from Mac. And Mac has asked, if we want to empower everyone's full potential, to what extent do we need to use our emotional intelligence as leaders?
100%. You know, ultimately, this is about helping people develop themselves. And what's fascinating about people is so many of us have blind spots. So we use our emotional intelligence to see, we use our emotional intelligence to listen, we use our emotional intelligence to shut up and hold the space and allow them to do the work. We use our intelligence to not rescue, but to sit alongside them and maybe help them with tools and frameworks to do their thinking, but not to do it for them. We need to stop parenting. Leadership is not parenting.
Okay, great. Thank you, Elke. Just a recommendation from Claire Mitchell is the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. So some of you may have read that before, but again, it's a book that we really recommend from Ivy House perspective. So,
great.
Okay, book. So unless anyone has any further last questions, anything else you wanted to add, Elke?
No, I just want you to go out and actually learn about yourselves at this time. It's the most phenomenal time. We're not commuting. We're not having to do all sorts of rubbishy things we've had to do in the past. Actually, I think it's a gift. And I think we will learn so much about ourselves if we have the courage to look inward, ask for feedback, ask your team what they want, ask your peers what they want from you. Go out and really engage in these conversations. And I think you'd be blown away by what you'll learn in a really short space of time.